What's up, everybody? Corey Hughes, Bloody History. We're back with a vengeance. Today we're going to continue to talk about Mr. Thomas Beckham. And what we're going to cover today is Mr. Beckham's interview with the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Okay, so I have to preface this by stating I got this document from Fred Litwin's website, and I fucking detest... I detest Fred Litwin, but I detest having to use files that he was able to find that I couldn't. So, where he got this, I don't know, but it is legit. It's valid. It is the interview. And when we get done going over this, I actually am going to play for you about a 15-minute segment recorded from the actual interview itself. So, be some good stuff. But let's get started. This is going to be the October 9th, 1977 interview of Thomas Beckham. It was recorded at a Holiday Inn in Jackson, Mississippi. All right. So, name Thomas Beckham, date October 9th, 1977, 11:15 a.m. Place Holiday Inn Medical, 2300 North State Street, Jackson, Mississippi. Interview. L.J. Delsa, and who was the other guy? L.J. Delsa does the most of the interview here, but we'll get to that momentarily. Delsa says, starting out, Tom, we had a preliminary discussion on October 1st, 1977, held here in Jackson, Mississippi. Do you remember that? Yes. Now what I want to read to you on this tape is an agreement that the committee is going to make with you, okay? It is our understanding that as a part of the preliminary discussion that Mr. Beckham will meet with the members of the Select Committee and discuss with them any information that he has that may be pertinent to the Select Committee's investigation. The object of these discussions is to determine what the substance of Mr. Beckham's testimony would be if he was granted immunity. Ultimately, of course, the Select Committee may not decide to obtain immunity for Mr. Beckham. In the event the Select Committee does not choose to obtain immunity, the Select Committee will not disclose or use any information that is received from Mr. Beckham during these preliminary discussions. It should also be noted that under such circumstances, as a matter of law, that this information would be privileged, and it could not be used by federal or state authorities in any criminal prosecution. Do you understand that? Right, I understand it. All right, with knowledge of this, will you now sit down and tell us what we discussed in the preliminary discussions we have had with you before? Yes, I will. This letter that you just read will be made part of this. This is made part of it. Right, okay, I guess the best place to start is a meeting I had in Algiers, Louisiana. That's as soon as you get off the ferry boat. It's in Orleans Parish. This meeting was attended by myself, Sergi Arcacha, G. Ray Gill, a gentleman which was told to me by the name of Marcello. If I'm not mistaken, a picture I've seen of him was Vincent Marcello. Along with me was a gentleman, a little bitty guy. His name was, oh Lord, let me see, Morello, Charlie Morello, and Sergi Arcacha was there. Roswell Thompson and a lady by the name of Burglass. She was Anna. She was a short, stout lady. At this meeting, a discussion was held. There was Cubans present, other ones. We talked about, I say we, they talked about the assassination of the president. There was also a lady, which I thought at the time to be the wife of Sergi Arcacha. Now, I could be wrong. We got out of a car. We parked. It was on the advice of the lady that her and Sergi Arcacha walked to the house first, that we were to follow behind. And I thought at the time it was because it was in a neighborhood that they didn't want to create no ruckus. They discussed at the time the Kennedy, his situation in the assassination. I don't know exactly how long it lasted because it's been a number of years. We also had a meeting at a place called the Town and Country. That's a motel, vaguely as I can remember, on the right-hand side of the highway going outwards towards the airport. This meeting was attended by a Marcello. There was G. Ray Gill and us there at the time. At this particular meeting, the Cuban issue was discussed. The president, his involvement, and how different things, that how the president refused to give air support, things like this was discussed. Also, I delivered a package approximately, I'd say, 2 weeks to Dallas prior to the assassination of the president, to a Mr. Howard. I went into Mr. G. Ray Gill's office. I was told to go there by a Mr. Ferry, which I knew real well. And in his office, they shuffled up some documents, which were drawings, that of a map or plots and stuff. There were some pictures, pictures of buildings and cars, and was regular pictures, but they wasn't glossy. They were put inside of an envelope, at which time G. Ray Gill handed me. It was either $100 or $200, and told me that I was to be taken to the airport. I was to deliver this package to a Mr. Howard at the Executive Inn. At that meeting was Roswell, was Jack Martin, David Ferris, Beckham's precise name, and a bunch of Sergio Arcacha. Also at that meeting was your Mr. Marcello, was at that meeting. They were sitting on a couch. I remember the couch. Let's see now. I delivered the package. Oh, they told me one thing was made. A remark was I was told to wear no jewelry, not to talk to any of the airline stewardesses or create any, draw anything to me. My good friend Clay Shaw was also there, and the envelope was put in a magazine. They bought me a magazine stuck inside there. I took a cab from the airport to a place called Executive Inn. That's in Dallas, where met Mr. Howard. Mr. Howard was upset because when I got out of the cab and was heading there, he tooted for me on his horn. The car was a kind of raggedy looking. I got in, handed him the package. He leaned against the door as if to face me, but the package was away from me, and I handed it to him just like it was in the magazine. He opened it up and looked at me a couple of times, and I looked off in the other direction, and he got real mad, said, this can't be all. This can't be all it is. I don't know the exact words. I said, yes, it is. He said, like hell, or something to that effect. It isn't. And I said, look, you can go call him, meaning you go call G. Ray Gill. I said, because that's all he gave me. So we drove from there about 3 blocks, and he pulled over again, and he reviewed the stuff that was in the package. Now, I didn't take nothing out of the package. I didn't, except for seeing it on Mr. Gill's desk and them shuffling it up, putting it inside the thing. I didn't. It was unintelligible. All I knew is it was photographs of buildings and cars and neatly drawn maps. Not like a regular city map, but it was diagrams and stuff drawn on paper. And at that time, to this day, I don't know. Again, I think I took a cab back to the airport. Anyway, I had a round trip. I went back and I discussed the fact that how upset Mr. Howard was. I discussed it with Roswell, which is A. Roswell Thompson. Also Mr. Gill. They went on from there. Another subject that I know that now was within a span of 2 weeks prior to the assassination of the president. One of the gentlemen that fits in thing that I now know was involved was a thing called the Organization, which we was all a part of. Mine strong contact was a gentleman by the name of F. Lee Chrisman, Fred Chrisman. Fred was, which he had told me that he was a CIA agent and that he had worked on a thing called Project Blue Book. And he discussed a lot of things that he was involved. I first met Fred at the Sheraton Charles Hotel. This was a number of years ago. It was before the assassination, and Fred was in the lobby. I met him with a friend of Jack Martin's, and I was inside the hotel, and he was talking to this friend of Jack. I went upstairs over the balcony and stood there about 10 to 15 minutes. There used to be a restroom up there. Went to the bathroom, came back. They were still talking. I stood up there looking down on Fred, and he stood out in my mind because of his haircut. He had a crew cut, and he was distinguished looking. I thought he looked like, this actor Glenn Ford. So I went back downstairs. Fred never said nothing to me. He was very polite, just nodded his head. This guy left. I think it was 2 days later, a day later, or something like that, I went inside Wholesome's cafeteria. And I liked cheesecake. Sitting at the table was, at the time, I didn't know who he was. I knew I'd seen him before. It was Fred Chrisman. And they was all sitting there talking. It was that friend of, there was, oh Lord, who I'm trying to think of, who all was at the table. There was a bunch of them at the table. Rosie was at the table, was one of them, and there was, Sergio Arcacha, which is the gentleman was involved with me in the Cuba Revolutionary Forces, and Sergi and me, and all was sitting at the table and talking, and Fred made a remark about my English. Said, this is how, getting kind of personal, I was kidding about cheesecake, how messy it was and watery, and he said he had a daughter or something, was killed in a car wreck, and she had liked cheesecake, too. And then he told me how atrocious my English was, but he did it in a very polite way, About 2 months later, I don't know how he got my address. About 2 months later, I got an English book from Fred, and through the years, our friendship developed, and after the assassination of the president and stuff, I got scared and took off. I ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska. To my surprise, I had a knock at the back door, standing Fred Chrisman telling me that I asked him to come in, and he said, I asked how did he find me, and he said, let's go for a ride. And I went for a ride with him, and that's where Fred discussed his connection with the organization and how he found me. And then Fred told me he thought it was best that I leave Lincoln, Nebraska. And if I didn't, he felt there would be trouble for me. And sure enough, within a couple of days, the police knocked at my door, told me they actually wanted me out of town. I got scared. I got in the car and took off to Omaha, Nebraska, without Fred's knowledge. And at the time, my then wife, Connie Diane Beckham, Bates was her maiden name. It's unintelligible. They loaded the car up, and they said that when they were leaving, that the police even stopped them wanting to know my location. And I got in Omaha, and that's where I got in my involvement with Fred, which found me at a hotel, which he provided me with some funds at, and told me to get an apartment and just lay low and relax. And which I did, and that's where I met Bob Lavender, which is a printer connected with the organization. To date, this is my involvement as far as the Kennedy thing. How about the discussion about the assassination? Then Fred, a thing that came up while we would discuss the assassination and things about later there in Omaha, this Garrison thing popped up. I was involved with Colonel Lowry. We had called B&L Bookstore, which I was going to start a gift shop, and Fred said, no, I'm going in with Lowry, Colonel Lowry, which was at Uffit Air Force Base on the advice of Chrisman. And this to be a place of business. We never sold no books. About a few days before the Garrison investigation came down, Chrisman told me to sever my connections with Lowry. I didn't know why, but he said, just do what I tell you. He was a very impressive man. As a matter of fact, he was able to call a plane called Looking Glass by just a telephone call. Would contact this aircraft, and that was airborne. He was able to get me on and off the base at Offutt Air Force Base through securities and stuff. I obtained an identification as a second lieutenant, which showed that I served in the service. I had met other friends of his, which was a Wayne A-hole, phonetic, was a major, also had military identification. What the object of the bookstore was that we never sold a book, I honestly don't know. Chrisman, when the thing came up, the Martin thing, I was sitting at my desk at my home, and Jack Martin and I had got a hold of him, and I found out I knew Martin was in the organization, and I thought that Martin was to sell me out, using me as the scapegoat. And I got mad at Martin and hung up with Martin, and that's when I received my telephone call from Chrisman, which at the time was not in Omaha. I think he was in Tacoma at the time, telling me don't worry about the investigation, that I was to go over to someplace in Iowa, that they couldn't serve me there, and not to worry about it. I said, well, Jack is selling me out. He said, don't worry about Jack. Jack is himself leading the investigation in another direction. And it's going in the opposite direction. Don't worry about it. He's working closely with the district attorney's office. And also they advised me that aide to the district attorney or assistant district attorney had political ambitions, and Jack and others in the organization knew how to manipulate, knew what to do. At which time, L.J. Delsa cuts him off. Says, excuse me, let me stop you there. You said that Jack and others in the organization knew how to manipulate. Yeah, Jack was one of the key men that was leading the investigation and was feeding the information back to Fred Lee Chrisman, how it's going. But you said Jack and other members of the organization. Right. So you were told prior to that there were other people in Garrison's investigation with Jack that were going to lead the investigation in a different direction. Yeah. I said, quote, now what about Ford Shell? I said, he's going to really be hung. And he said, don't worry about Shell. He's going to come out smelling like a rose, that he's going to make several thousands of dollars off it. And besides that, Garrison would step in and he's going to come out smelling like a. But then that really made me feel good, because then I knew at the time that it made sense, that Jack was the plant inside of it, and would feeding information, only the information he wanted Garrison to know. And as a result of that, I ended up over in Iowa on his advice. And while in Iowa, I rented the trailer on his advice, which he told me that I would be safe, that they had some kind of I was happy for that, because within just a matter of seconds, I beat the marshals that were serving me the papers. As I ended in Iowa and was safe, and then within a week, so I received $300 in the mail, and to sustain me. But like an idiot, I was contacted by a gentleman that told me that one of my friends had to get hold of me. It was very important. And with the help of a guy by the name of Jim Holver, used to be on the police department there, I come across into Omaha going up to this place to see this guy that said this guy wanted to get a hold of me. And it was only a setup because then I got served with the papers. Then I was told after that something, under all reasons, I had to try to stay away from the investigation. I was told this by Fred. Fred told me to stay away. Now, this is something I haven't told nobody. Fred told me that no matter what, even though I got the papers, it was wise to stay away. I say, why? He said, anything, get sick, car accident, or anything. So we staged a car accident, me and another guy, and ran in front of a laundromat. And I claimed I was injured, couldn't go, but they brought me before a judge, and the judge ordered that I be returned. And so then I went back, and that's when I met, by the way, Fred told me not to mention anything about, not to worry either. But so I was met by A. Roswell Thompson. That's his first initial, A. Rosie took full charge, told me what to say in the grand jury. When they asked me to swear, stall them by saying, I don't believe in swearing. They brought me up before, and he said, because we have some friends here that don't want to have no problems. Tom, and you don't want to have no problems, which I didn't. And I did not tell one thing to the grand jury. As a matter of fact, at the grand jury, there was a black man sitting to the right and a woman sitting to the left that was interested in metaphysics. And I was showing her some cards in my wallet. And I purposely had misstated about metaphysics, where she would really think, because I knew he was into metaphysics. And I thought if I talked to her wrong about metaphysics in a wrong way, she would figure, well, this guy really is a nitwit. And it worked. Then they were satisfied with what they got from me. And I was satisfied. And I got out of town fast. From then on, I've been using aliases and avoiding things and stuff. That's the whole story about the organization. The organization has other connections I'd rather not talk about, Delsa then says, all right, fine. Tom, let me ask you this. During your course of being affiliated with the organization, during the period of 59 to 63, and even since then, has times come up where you were put, say, in a mental institution? Could you explain to us the situations and the purpose? Okay, one time, Delsa says of being, Beckham then says, I went to a Mr. Bannister and had told him information that I had heard about the assassination of the president and about Jack Martin's involvement, and he was all upset. His name was Guy Bannister, and he ran a private detective agency, and the reason I told him, he had displayed the fact, some kind of credential that he was an former FBI agent or something, I don't remember them. But anyway, he was concerned about it. I told Jack about it, and within a matter of either a day, or I don't remember now what it was, I was arrested in front of a building impersonating a priest, put in a police car, taken to a place called the 1st District Police Department, was visited by an FBI agent, which then he walked back there and said FBI, and that's the one time I just right up and told him, look, y'all have got to help me. Because at the time I thought I was working for the government and stuff, and he left. It couldn't have been even 5 minutes. He was with me. Then a bald-headed policeman came back there and said, what are we going to do with him? And he said, we'll take care of it. And I'd say within 30 minutes, a guy came in with a stretcher, and they opened a door, told me to get on the stretcher, and naturally I was scared to death and started a ruckus, and they held me down for the stretcher, and I was wheeled away and went to Charity Hospital, where I was visited by some man that told me that I was going to get out, and a priest which talked to a doctor, because the priest said for him to let me go, and I was released from the hospital. I don't know how many days. It wasn't very many days that I was there, and my parents were told that I had attempted to commit suicide. After I got out of the hospital, I received connections. I met Jack and a few others. There's a siren going by. Wait a second. Okay, after I got out of the hospital, I still got involved with them again, and I was told by some Cuban individuals that if I wanted to remain in the organization and stuff, I should know how to keep my mouth shut and know who my friends are. And I stuck around with them for a while or something. And one time before or after that I forget how, I put myself in a hospital too, a couple of times to evade them, to create an image that I was mentally ill. And a lot of times I would actually make people think that for a simple reason. And I thought it was safe for me. And well, just like this thing up at Springfield recently, but that has nothing to do with it. But anyway, that's the whole egg in a nutshell. All right, let me ask you this. Of course, I could be nuts, I'm not sure. And he laughs, but I don't think so. Okay, this is what I want to get to the point. All right. You knew G. Ray Gill, Sergio Arcacha, Jack Martin. Beckham then says Lucius Rebel. Lucius Rebel and them for being in an organization in New Orleans. Right. That's all over, the organization. All right. Well, I'm specifically talking about the dates. Right. That we have in question from 59 to 63. When the president was assassinated. Now, you mentioned delivering a package in Dallas 2 weeks before the assassination. To Lawrence Howard. Briefly, I want you to tell me how you came to meet Lawrence Howard. Did you know Lawrence Howard? Yes. Before you went to Dallas. Right, yeah. I seen Lawrence Howard on maybe 7 or 8, 9 different occasions. Where? One time was at a church thing we had where guns were stored there, but these guns were to be used for the Cuban thing. They were packed inside crates. Then I learned from another guy that came in there, a big, tall, skinny man, that lanky kind of guy, that he had asked that Howard, had he taken the guns to Texas. The guns was supposed to be taken to Texas. Yeah, now Howard and Hall both was at the mission. As a matter of fact, we had cans that we put out and said, "Keep America free," that communist aggression is just 90 miles away from the shores. I obtained the cans personally through which Continental Can Company, I think at the time was Harvey. They gave us what they called slotted cans, and these cans were opened at the church and funds were emptied out of the cans. As a matter of fact, they used the can openers to do them. Meetings and stuff were carried at the church, which was an upstairs section, which myself had a key to the church. Jack had a key to the church. Gil, I know for a fact, had a key to the church because he came in there. And Sergio Arcacha had a key. Hall had a key. Howard had a key. Everybody had keys to this place. Wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald a visitor at the church? Yeah, Lee was. Well, I knew Lee. I knew him real well. Was he? As a matter of fact, quite a few times, Lee talked about his friend, the chief, that was to help him. And I know for a fact, and I believe in my heart, and I know he had no reason to lie. One time I just told him if he didn't stop some of his crazy stuff, he used to make me mad. He said the chief would take care of me. I said, why don't you stop all this silly stuff? He said, no, the chief, which he told was the head of the FBI then, which was Hoover, he said he didn't have to worry about those local FBI, that the chief would take care of him, that he had his ins, and that this was no worry. Lee, as a matter of fact, one day I met Lee was up in front of the old International Trade Mart building this morning. He was giving out some kind of free Cuba or something. We went and had a Coke down there on Canal Street, and he told me that particular day he was just on television or something. But in another meeting I met with Lee, that was when we talked about just getting back from Mexico, and he was going to be coming into some money. I think this was in September, if I'm not mistaken. And he talked about his trip to Mexico, and he'd be coming into some funds. And let me pause for a second right here. Everything he's saying here is extremely suspect. Okay. So remember, my belief, based upon the evidence at hand that indicates as much, is that the Oswald lookalike, who was seen and claimed to have been an associate of Guy Bannister and David Ferry and all these guys, was actually Kerry Thornley, right? We know Kerry Thornley picked up the flyers from Jones Printing, et cetera, right? We know Kerry Thornley was directly involved in the setup and that he was involved in the Tippit shooting and the incidents at the Texas Theater. He was balls deep in this thing, okay? So when you have Thomas Beckham talking about how he knew Lee Harvey Oswald, but yet I can say with certainty some of the situations he says he knew Oswald in were not Oswald. It was fucking Kerry Thornley. So therefore, Beckham isn't stupid. He knows all of this. Beckham is an insider on everything, okay? He knows who the real Lee Harvey Oswald is. He knows who Kerry Thornley is. He knows all this stuff because he's in the fucking mix with all this shit. He very selectively never mentions Kerry Thornley, despite the level of importance that Kerry Thornley had in all of this stuff. So he's clearly lying. He never mentions the fact that he was in Dallas, as is proven by the photograph of him walking behind fucking Kennedy's limo at the airport, which is clearly him. Unmistakably him at the airport in Dallas, right? So he was far more involved in this than he's letting on. Okay? So, getting to the truth in his statement. How do we do that? Well, it's difficult. It's difficult, right? We need some corroboration of things. And if we can't corroborate specific things, what kind of things can we corroborate? Well, he naturally here, and this is in the 1970s, when nobody in the world, no researcher knew who the hell, other than maybe Weisberg, knew who Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard and William Seymour were, right? But Beckham seemingly knew them well enough to know to lump them together in a single sentence, right? He knew them that they were close enough together that he was able to put them together within a sentence or two in New Orleans, that all these guys had the key to this church, right? And he doesn't mention Lauren Hall until he's questioned about Lawrence Howard. So he automatically made an association between those two in his mind. Why? Because he knew them in New Orleans and he knew to associate them because they were always associated together, right? So, therefore, what do I always say? How do you know when someone's telling the truth about something? Well, because they provide details that they wouldn't have known or understood the significance of otherwise, right? Do you really think that a guy who was not involved in the assassination, who barely knew Ferry and these guys, who claims to not have known Clay Shaw as per his testimony at the Warren Commission and even at the Clay Shaw trials, right? So what you have is Thomas Beckham linking together Hall and Howard, which he wouldn't really know that unless he really knew these guys, right? And if he really knew these guys and he's at the airport in Dallas, he's far more involved in what he's saying. So therefore, when it comes to the information he's giving us, some of it you can look at and go, yeah, that's plausible. Like when he talks about this meeting, right? And he mentions like Lucius Rebel, right? Otherwise known as Louis Rebel, or Abel, right? So, I hope you can see what I'm saying here, right? He's naming all these people who are all kinds of tied up in the assassination, right? So if he was just making it up, he wouldn't know to provide some of these details, right? He just wouldn't know to provide half of this stuff. And he knows all of these guys. One time at a church thing, I want to know what church this is. I want to know what the church is. See, because it's not a real church, right? So this brings us back to like the temple in Oak Cliff, right? The, Jesus Christ, what is it called? Oh my God, I'm losing it. Abundant Life Temple. Okay, the Abundant Life Temple in Oak Cliff, right? Not a real temple, not a fucking church organization. It was a big church that was incorporated and it was rented out by a bunch of schmoes, but it had nothing. They weren't running church services there, right? That's what they're doing here. Everybody had a key to this building because it was a church. It was a fake church. It was probably being used for money raising and laundering. And Beckham at the time, he was a fake preacher, right? So he's a fake preacher going to a fake church, and he knows all these people. Howard, and he's naming Arcacha, and he's naming Vincent Marcello. He wouldn't know who the fuck Vincent Marcello was if he wasn't involved with these people, right? So when I read the writings of people like Fred Litwin who try to discount Beckham as like a fucking nobody, it's like, go fuck yourself. You're such a shit fucking, I don't even want to call you a researcher, Mr. fucking Litwin, because you're such a scumbag. Like, you're a piece of shit Zionist traitor to your fucking country. Like, fuck you, dude. God damn it. Beckham obviously knows what he's talking about. He was obviously knew these people. He was obviously involved with all these people for a very long period of time. 59 to 63. 59, that's 4 fucking years leading up to the assassination. Give me a fucking break. There's enough circumstantial evidence to put fucking him as a central, I'd say probably a, what do they call those guys who send a messenger or some kind of courier, or he's a low-level fucking CIA schmuck, right? He's a con man. They use him for whatever they need him for. That's what this guy does. That's what a guy did for his whole fucking life. So the idea that he talks about getting cans from this Continental Can Company, and he talks about them cutting them open and there being money inside. Like, this is how the CIA operated. He's giving us an inside look on how the CIA operated, right? Like, he wouldn't know this stuff in 1977. He wouldn't know this stuff. The general public didn't know the CIA did this stuff at that time, right? He wouldn't know any of this stuff if he wasn't all kinds of tied up with it. So despite the fact that there isn't a single piece of information here that he's providing us that can specifically be corroborated, he's giving us enough evidence of his associations. And like I keep saying, relationships are fucking everything, right? So to me, the specifics of the meeting are kind of irrelevant. Even the specifics of who was there are kind of irrelevant, because we can kind of already connect him to G. Ray Gill, and we know G. Ray Gill is the connection to Marcello, and so the connection to those shooters in New Orleans came down from Meyer Lansky to the 3 mob bosses, one of which is Marcello, and then from there, obviously, the orders came down through Clay Shaw, so we have the nexus between the relationship of Clay Shaw and Carlos Marcello, which were obviously working together to pull this off. And here at this meeting that he's talking about, he's naming people on both sides who would, in all likelihood, be there. Right? So none of this is fucking ridiculous. Like, if he were to all of a sudden say that fucking, like Joe Schmo mobster over here was there and Nicoletti was there, and he starts naming Roscoe White. If he started naming like just names of, I would know who was bullshit. I would know that he was straight up lying. But the names he's giving are plausible, right? The names he's giving are plausible, right? You can't say for certain that he's telling the 100% truth, but there's nothing egregious sticking out about the information that he's providing that would indicate that he's lying, right? So that's the best I can kind of give you on why I generally am inclined to believe what he's saying here, right? Just like when Perry Russo talks about the triangulation of Crossfire, that fucking schmuck would not know anything about triangulation of Crossfire unless he happened to be at a fucking meeting where they were talking about triangulation of Crossfire, right? It's little things like this. All right, so he's talking about Lee Harvey Oswald, and I am dubious of his fucking talking about Oswald because we know that much of the Oswald stuff that was going on in New Orleans was being done by Kerry Thornley, as Oswald was basically kept out of Dodge while he was being set up, right? So, well, let's continue and see what he has to say. Wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald a visitor at the church? Yeah, Lee was, I knew Lee. I knew him real well. Was he? As a matter of fact, quite a few times, Lee talked about his friend, the chief, that was to help him. And I know for a fact, and I believe in my heart, and I know he had no reason to lie. And one time I just told him if he didn't stop his crazy stuff, he used to make me mad. He used to say the chief would take care of me. All right, so let me stop right here. So this gives me pause to think that this was Kerry Thornley and not Oswald. And I'll tell you why. Because in Kerry Thornley's stuff that we went over in like the 20 fucking episodes we had on Kerry Thornley, and one of those, if you will recall, he's talking about Guy Bannister, and he refers to Guy Bannister as chief, right? Specifically says this. He specifically referred to Guy Bannister as chief because Guy Bannister was a former chief of New Orleans police or assistant chief of New Orleans police for a couple of years before he ended up retiring and starting his own detective agency or whatever fucking front he was running on Camp Street, right? So when I read this and I see the specific reference to chief, it makes me think of Kerry Thornley's specific reference to Guy Bannister and chief, right? And Guy Bannister, let's face it, he was a very important guy in the intelligence world in New Orleans. So I said, why don't you stop this silly stuff? He said, no, the chief, which he told was the head of the FBI then, which was Hoover. He said he didn't worry about those local FBI, that the chief would take care of him and that he had his ins and that this was no worry. Okay, so now if it is Lee Harvey Oswald and this person is referring to a relationship he had with J. Edgar Hoover, I don't have any evidence to back that up other than the fact that we know that Hoover was aware of Lee Harvey Oswald and that somebody was impersonating him as far back as, September of 1960. Right? So there's an indicator that Hoover knew who Lee Harvey Oswald was way before any of this stuff, 4 years before any of this shit. So, possible. It's possible. Lee, as a matter of fact, one day I met Lee, was up in front of the old International Trade Mart building this morning. He was giving out some kind of free Cuba or something. This thing we went on and had a Coke down there on Canal Street, and he told me that particular day he was just on television or something. But in another meeting I had with Lee was that he talked about just getting back from Mexico. And he was going to be coming into some money. So this is where we have some problems, because I can tell you with certainty Oswald didn't go to Mexico. Okay, he didn't. Kerry Thornley went to Mexico. He admitted going to Mexico. The dates correspond with the dates that Kerry Thornley was fucking out of New Orleans and not being able to be traced anywhere. Oswald never went to Mexico City. So the idea that Beckham is talking about Lee telling him he just got back from Mexico, I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. Unless they had some flights of Lee Harvey Oswald going to Mexico at other times that we're completely unaware of, that we just don't know about, right? Because I believe he was kept out of fucking Dallas and kept out of New Orleans, and he was obviously being sent elsewhere around the country or the world to do various things so they could set him up in town. What he was doing, nobody fucking knows. Is it possible he went to Mexico? It's possible, but does it have anything to do with the known visits of Oswald to Mexico City? Most certainly not. He was going to be coming into some money. I believe this was in September, if I'm not mistaken. And he talked about his trip to Mexico. Okay, so here's another problem. He's talking to him in September, and he had already been to Mexico. But the reality is that the trip to Mexico City didn't allegedly take place until September the 25th. He didn't leave until the 25th, crossed the border on the 26th, didn't arrive till the 27th. And then he's back allegedly at the YMCA in Dallas on October 3rd, right? And then the next day on October 4th, he goes and meets with Laura Cottrell at the Texas Employment Commission, allegedly, but that was Larry Crawford. It's a whole other story, right? So the timing here is wrong. He's talking about this is in September, but Oswald had already been to Mexico. So did the real Oswald go to Mexico prior to mid-September, prior to mid to late September, right? As in lieu of the trip on September 25th. I don't think so. I mean, we have no evidence to suggest that. There's like not a shred of evidence to suggest that. And I'm sure there's some kind of timeline that accounts for Oswald's timing that month. Remember, September 17th, he allegedly goes to the Mexican consulate to get his visa application turned in. That would have been around this time or maybe sooner. But remember, Kerry Thornley is the one who went to Mexico City, and returned to New Orleans September 4th, right? So is it possible that fucking Beckham knew Kerry Thornley as Lee Harvey Oswald as part of the maintaining appearances, maintaining the legend? Could Beckham have known Kerry Thornley as Lee Harvey Oswald? I'd say it's possible. It's probable. Who knows? I'm very open to it at this point, though. So let me continue. I think it was September, if I'm not mistaken, and he did talk about his trip to Mexico, and he'd be coming into some funds. Was anybody else at this meeting? Oh, yeah. I think at the meeting, and now he's talking about the meeting again. He's like, I'm not really certain. I think that Arcacha was, and some guys. I can't think of his name. He made, we had a coin that was used not only for identification, but it was like a highly fundraising thing it was supposed to be. And this coin we used for an identification along with a card. And I used to have some certificates and stuff. But recently, somebody conveniently broke into a place I had and stole them, some of the information I have. Let me ask you one question about your role in the church. You set up a phony church? No, it was supposed to be a legitimate church. The way they claimed, which was because the authenticity of it was so legitimate, was the fact that they told me that, well, they talked about a gentleman by the name of Rumble or Ramble or something. He was supposed to be the head of a archdiocese there in New Orleans, and they said they called me the Padre. That's how they put it, unless they were around somebody that I guess they was really impressing, and they said this was Father Beckham. They first obtained, Jack did for me, a thing called OSJ, Order of St. John. Later on the establishment of the church, I received an instruments they called Instruments of Ordination, which no one knew that I recorded them, but I recorded them in the Registry of Conveyances office in New Orleans, and that was in the Old Catholic Church of North America, which they took me to meet the Little Sisters of the Poor, and they said that they had already contacted this archbishop. As a matter of fact, I'm sure they did, because they also brought me in a couple of these Cuban men, cards that they said came from the archbishop. And if I'm not mistakenly wrong, it had the Mass in Latin, and these cards I was to lay up on the altar to celebrate the Mass. You were instructed by people outside of the church on how to conduct the Mass? No, there was one gentleman in particular that had several meetings there that had if I'm remembering, he had an extra wide collar. I remember priests usually wear, I'm not a Catholic, so I don't know, wore a little small collar. This gentleman had an extra wide gap in his collar, and I asked him about it, and he said, well, the collar is real. I said, that's a Roman collar on it, they call it. And he said, no, it's a clerical collar, They obtained for me vestments, which are called a rabbi, and stuff to use, plus my clothes, which was I had 2 suits, 2 black suits, and about 3 rabbis. And now my first rabbi was given to me by Jack Martin. And then I received this priest guy, a little black thing, and you zip open, had little glasses in it, and some little white things, and another thing that had candles in it, and a little purple-looking thing that I put around my neck in the celebration of Mass. Let's see, that's about it. That's about all I can tell you. Did they go as far as to teach you, and Beckham says, the celebration of Mass? The fundamentals of celebrating the Mass. Beckham says, yeah, how to kiss the thing, how to make a sick call, delivering the last rites. I forgot a lot of it now. I was Dominus and all this stuff, it's been years, but because I've had no need for it now, but they taught me that. They taught me the Mass. They said the reason for that is that you've got to be able, they said, in case you come in, they said there's a lot of Catholics that know how to celebrate the Mass as good as a priest, is what they said. Which made sense, but I remember then remarking the fact that one gentleman asked, what about the I remember the name Archdiocese stands out in my mind, that they had contacted this Archbishop Rumble. He already knows about my being, and I was to be known as, now I could be wrong, circular priest. That way, they said I would have no particular area that would house me in, whatever they meant by that. But it was called circular. You could check and see what that means. I was never schooled on what that meant. Okay, now to bring this down and put it on record in our preliminary discussions before, later in your contact with the organization with Chrisman you found to be a bishop in these various churches. Now, you don't know this for a fact, but you spoke to us prior in this discussion and told us who you believe set this system up in New Orleans. Will you tell us now who you think set this system up with the church? Well, I think Fred Chrisman, because the organization's all over the country. I'd rather not go into it now because there are different connections of people and other things, but I think Fred Chrisman is the whole front of the whole thing because he's not just, he has too many contacts, too many, he tells me who to contact. As a matter of fact, one time I received a telephone call from a priest, which was, you very well know his name, and I pronounce, starts with a B, you had a thing in your file. If I state the name, would you be able to recognize it? All right. Raymond Brashears. Yeah. Brashears was a homosexual, and Raymond had called me. He was concerned about his involvement in some things, and I'm sure that he was more concerned if maybe some other possibility, not so above board operations and other things. And when I advised Fred of it, Fred told me I ought to sever all my connections. All of us should, with anyone that had connections in the New Orleans, and that was it. And then at the time, he wrote a letter to him. All right, now Fred told you this. Right. And we've discussed this before. Right now, I'd like you to put in your own words, all right, the reason why Fred told you to sever relations with the contacts that you had in New Orleans, and primarily the reason. Okay, when I found out later and talking to other people, I was puzzled about what could have happened. And how close Garrison's investigation. I knew the way things were because I didn't have all the answers myself because I was just a part of it. I was told by a friend of Fred Chrisman's that a very good friend of ours was involved in the assassination, you see. And I asked Fred, did he think that, and I was told that Lee was just one of the persons, that there was 3 persons involved. When I confronted Fred with the deal, he says, how does it fit? Does it make sense to you? And I said, yes. He said, well, just leave it at that. He was so unconcerned about the whole thing. That's the way he was. The whole picture was Fred. Fred had the ins and outs and the answers, and he knew everybody connected in the thing. Everybody. Fred knew about how things had taken place, things that had happened, and only body would know. Only body would know had to be Fred. Had to be and would know. You see, like Fred wasn't at any of the meetings that took place in New Orleans. No, but later after the assassination, Fred had knowledge of you delivering the package. Oh, he knew it. Yeah, Fred knew everything that took place. As a matter of fact, when I told him he was upset about Ray, and I'm saying I'm going to call him back, and he says, no. He said, don't call him back. He says, y'all are going to sever all your connections, everybody. He was forceful in his way. And he said he wanted me to contact him, but by letter, and exactly what he dictated to me, the way he sent the letter. The way to send the letter. He said that Ray would get the picture once he got the letter. That Ray would understand. That Ray would understand the picture, what to do. And he said not to be contacting him. And from then on, I never contacted Ray. I stayed away from him. I believe he's talking about Brashears, Raymond Brashears. Now, in all the years that you have known Fred Chrisman, do you know of any business or occupation he has been gainfully employed? No. Where did he get his money from? I don't know. What is his lifestyle? First class. His automobile. First class. Cadillacs. Things like that. His travel? Airplanes. Bank Americards. American Express cards. Matter of fact, I know Fred's with the organization. There's no use misleading anybody on that. The organization I'm with, the knowledge, that's it. It does... Fred told me that the organization was employed by the Central Intelligence Agency for various things. That the agency used certain some for the icing and some for the cake. That's who's in his remarks, and that's the way we done it. Matter of fact, I ended up back in Dallas with Fred in 1960, in another date I'd rather not say. Well, anyway, back in 1968. And I ended up with Fred at the Executive Inn where I was staying at. We rented 2 rooms. Same place I met Howard. Okay. This is fucking hilarious to me. Let's see what can we extrapolate from this fuck up that he just dumped on us here. And that's the way we done it. Matter of fact, I ended up back in Dallas with Fred in 1960, and then he cuts himself off. In another date I'd rather not say. What year could he possibly have not wanted to have said that he was in Dallas? Which trip could he have been referring to? Could it have been the trip that he was photographed at the airport behind Kennedy's car in 1963? Because that's the only time he's not supposed to have been in Dallas, right? Because he already admitted to them that 2 weeks before the assassination, he did go to Dallas. Despite the fact that when he gave the testimony to the Clay Shaw grand jury, he stated that he hadn't been to Dallas until 1966, right? So here he's saying, I ended up back in Dallas with Fred in 1960, and then it cuts off. And another date I'd rather not say. Okay, period. New sentence. Well, anyway, back in 1968, I ended up with Fred at the Executive Inn where I was staying at. We rented the rooms, the same place. Rented 2 rooms, the same place I met Howard. So I have a feeling he cut himself off because he admitted that he was there in 1963. I ended up back in Dallas with Fred in 1960, and then he cuts off. I'm gonna have to ponder this one for a while. And I was in the next room, and Fred was in another one, and Fred always told me not to come through, though. There were adjoining doors, but always to knock because people like their privacy. Well, on this particular day, I went out in the hall, and somebody I was joking with, I was kidding, knocked at his door, and Fred had a habit when he opens his door, he just don't open it and peep through it. He pokes back and stood there, 3 or 4, maybe 5 Spanish people, men. They were discussing things with Fred. Matter of fact, me and Fred carried money for the Republican Party. And he said the reason we carried it is because I asked him, I said, that seems silly to have somebody carry the money. He said, no. And I know why now later. I mean, I'm a lot older. But he said at the time, the reason the money was carried was because certain monies couldn't go through certain channels and that we carried the money for, I said, well, just one party. He said, no, both parties does it. Every party does it. And they carry funds. And that's what we did. We carried funds back and forth, different places, and a matter of fact on this, well, this one occasion, I don't know what all transpired at all. Right, but this particular trip you stayed at the same Executive Inn. Executive Inn. That's right. In our discussion, we showed you a photograph of a motel. Right. Matter of fact, let me tell you what happened. Fred schooled me when I got to New Orleans, Louisiana. He said that they would eventually find out about our trip to Dallas. Mine and his, if they investigated it. So he wanted me to make it known to the newspaper that the only trip I'd ever made to Dallas was with him. He wanted that brought out, he said. And I did. Yeah, let me pause right here. Is anything that he said here, ridiculous or out of the ordinary or out of the question? No. Everything he's saying here is completely plausible. Is it what happened? We don't know. We'll never know. But is it plausible, and does it lend some kind of credence that he knew things above and beyond what somebody should know about this shit in 1977 or about what people should know about the CIA in 1977, right? Do you know the purpose? On what? On that? Yep. He said in case anything came up, he wanted it noted, and I made it known. Was it because of a particular reason, such as, I don't know, such as he didn't want them to be able to trace you going to Dallas in 63 in November, delivering the package? That's possible. He said if somebody says, you've never been in Dallas, he said, they might catch you in a lie. So just point blank, say that you was in Dallas. Okay, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I'd say so. Okay, the tape is running sort of long now. Is understood by this tape that you will talk to one of the counsels, an attorney, right, from the select committee. And that if necessary, you will testify before the select committee on assassinations. Right. With immunity, if I get immunity, because I don't want to be caught in the middle, okay? But you said nothing that can be used against me anyway. So I will talk to them, yes, under the conditions that we read to you at the beginning. Right, of this tape. Right, okay. All right, this is the end of tape. The time is now 11:50 a.m. All right. What do you think of that? I think it's pretty fascinating. Is it all true? No, definitely not, because he doesn't admit to being in Dallas on November 22nd, which he was, right? So he's telling him as much as he can without trying to say that he was part of the active operation, because as soon as he says that, all of his immunity's out the fucking window, right? So there's a lot to digest here. I'm going to end up rereading this a bunch of times. Yes, Beckham was an active participant in the assassination, but as you can tell by what he did for the CIA in the years before and after the assassination, he's just a low-level schlep, a courier. He's a nobody. You know, he delivers money and delivers payoffs and does little shit like that. And all the organizations that he formed and the churches he formed are nothing more than tax laundering, money laundering, all that shit. And so, yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, I rate the truthfulness of this at about a 6. So, but I may be wrong. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to play a very big thanks to Tony for finding this. We're going to play 15 minutes recording of the actual session here. So that's going to do it for today. Please stick around and listen to this recording. It's going to be fascinating. If you haven't bought the book yet, please go to Amazon and buy the book. It's called A Warning from History. It's the foundation of this podcast and everything we talk about here. So that's going to do it for me today. And tune in tomorrow, and we will continue with some more documents that we've uncovered on Thomas Beckham, and we will show the fraud that he really was. Thanks, everybody.
Investigators Robert Burris and L.J. Delta. This interview is being held at the Holiday Inn Medical at 2300 North State Street, Jackson, Mississippi. October 9th, 1977. The time is 11:15 a.m. Starting out, Tom, we had a preliminary discussion on October 1st, 1977, held here in Jackson, Mississippi. You remember that?
Yes.
All right, now what I want to read to you on this tape is the agreement that the committee is going to make with you.
Okay.
It is our understanding that as a part of the preliminary discussion that Mr. Beckham will meet with the members of the select committee and discuss with them any information that he has that may be pertinent to the select committee's investigation. The object of these discussions is to determine what the substance of Mr. Beckham's testimony would be if he was granted immunity. Ultimately, of course, the select committee may not decide to obtain immunity for Mr. Beckham. In the event that the select committee does not choose to obtain immunity, the select committee will not disclose or use any information that is received from Mr. Beckham during these preliminary discussions. It should be also noted that under such circumstances, as a matter of law, that this information would be privileged and it could not be used by federal or state authorities in any criminal prosecution. You understand that?
Right, I understand.
All right, with the knowledge of this, will you now sit down and tell us what we discussed in the preliminary discussions we have had with you before?
Yes, I will. This letter that you just read will be made a part of this. It is an agreement, right?
This is made a part.
Right. Okay, I guess the best place to start is a meeting that I had in Algiers, Louisiana. That's as soon as you get off the ferry boat. It's in Orleans Parish. This meeting was attended by myself, Sergio Kacha, G. Ray Gill, a gentleman which was told to me by the name of Marcello. If I'm not mistaken, a picture I seen of him was Vincent Marcello. Along with me was a gentleman, little bitty guy. His name was, oh Lord, let's see, Morello, Charlie Morello. And Sergio Kacha was there, Roswell Thompson, and a lady by the name of Berglass. She's Anna. She's a little short, stout lady. At this meeting, a discussion was held about, it was Cubans present, others. We talked about, I say we, they talked about the assassination of the president. There was also a lady, which I thought at the time to be the wife of Sergei Akachi. Now, I could be wrong. We got out of a car, we parked. It was on the advice of the lady that her and Sergei Akachi walked to the house first, that we were to follow behind. I thought at the time it was because it was in a neighborhood they didn't want to create no ruckus. They discussed at the time the Kennedy, his situation, and the assassination. I don't know exactly how long it lasted because it's been a number of years. We also had a meeting at a place called the Town and Country. That's a motel, vaguely as I can remember, on the right-hand side of a highway going out towards the airport. This meeting was attended by a Marcello. There was a G. Ray Gill and us there at that time. At that particular meeting, the Cuban issue was discussed, the president, his involvement, and how all different things, the betrayal, how the president refused to give air support, things like this that was discussed. Also, I delivered a package approximately, I'd say 2 weeks, to Dallas prior to the assassination of the president to a Mr. Howard. I went into Mr. G. Ray Gill's office. I was told to go there by Mr. Ferry, which I knew real well. And in his office, they shuffled up some documents which were drawings, that of a map or plots and stuff. There were some pictures of buildings and cars, and it was regular pictures, but they wasn't glossy. They were put inside of an envelope, at which time G. Ray Gill handed me, it was either $100 or $200, told me that I was going to be taken to the airport. I was to deliver this package to Mr. Howard, the executive Inn. At that meeting was Roswell, was Jack Martin, David Ferris, and a bunch of Sergei Akachi. Also at that meeting was your Mr. Marcello was at that meeting, they were sitting on a couch. I remember the couch. Let's see now. I delivered the package. Oh, they told me one thing was made remark was that I was to wear no jewelry, not to talk to any of the airline stewardess, to create any, draw anything to me. My good friend Clay Shaw was also there, and the envelope was put in a magazine. They bought me a magazine, stuck it inside there. I took a cab from the airport to a place called Executive Inn, that's in Dallas, where I met Mr. Howard. Mr. Howard was upset because when I got out of the cab and was heading there, he tooted for me in his horn. The car was a kind of a raggedy-looking car. I got in, handed him the package, and he leaned against the door as if to face me, but the package was away from me. And I handed it to him just like it was in the magazine. He opened it up, and he looked at me a couple of times, and I fixed to look off in the other direction. And he got real mad. He said, this can't be all. This can't be all it is. I don't know the exact words. I said, yes, it is. He said, like H or something to that effect, it isn't. And I said, look, you can go call him, meaning to go call G. Ray Gill. I said, because that's all he gave me. So we drove from there about 3 blocks. He pulled over again. He reviewed the stuff that was in the package. Now, I didn't take nothing out of the package. I didn't even, except for seeing it on Mr. Gill's desk and them shuffling it up, putting it inside the thing, it was no knowledge. All I knew was photographs of buildings and cars and neatly drawn maps. Not like a regular city map, but it was diagrams and stuff drawn on paper. And at that time, to this day, I don't know, again, I think I took a cab back to the airport. Anyway, I had round trip. I went back and I discussed the fact of how upset Mr. Howard was. I discussed it with Roswell, which is A. Roswell Thompson, and also Mr. Gill. But that thing went on from there. Another subject that I know, that now this was within a span of 2 weeks prior to the assassination of the president. One of the gentlemen that fits in a thing that I knew I was involved in was a thing called the organization, which we was all a part of. My strong contact was a gentleman by the name of F. Lee Christman, Fred Christman. Fred was which he had told me that he was a CIA agent. And he had worked on a thing called Project Blue Book, and he discussed a lot of things he was involved in. I first met Fred was at the Charles Hotel. This was a number of years ago. It was before the assassination. And Fred was in the lobby. I met him with a friend of Jack Martin's. And I was inside the hotel, and he was talking to him, this friend of Jack's. I went upstairs over the balcony and stood there about maybe 10 or 15 minutes. There used to be a restroom up there. I went to the bathroom and came back. They were still talking. I stood up there looking down on Fred, and he stood out in my mind because of his haircut. He had a crew cut, and he was distinguished looking. I thought he looked like, this actor, Glenn Ford. So I went back downstairs. Fred never said nothing to me. He was very polite and just nodded his head. Man, this guy left. About, I think it was 2 days later, a day later or something like that, I went inside Wholesom's cafeteria, and I liked cheesecake. Sitting at the table was, at the time I didn't know who he was. I knew I'd seen him before, was Fred Crispin. And they was all sitting there and talking. It was that friend of whatchamacallits. There was, oh Lord, I'm confused. I'm trying to think who all was at the table. There was a bunch of them at the table. Rozzy was at the table, was one of them. And they was, Sergio Cacha, which is the gentleman who was involved with me in the Cuban Revolutionary Forces. And Sergio and me and all of us sat at the table and talked, and Fred made a remark about my English. Said, this is how we really got on person. I was kidding about the cheesecake, how messy it was and watery, and he said he had a daughter or something that was killed in a car wreck, and she had liked cheesecake too. And then he told me how atrocious my English was, but he did it in a very polite way. And about 2 months later, I don't know how he got my address, but about 2 months later I got an English book from Fred. And through the years our friendship developed, and after the assassination of the president and stuff, and I got scared and took off, I ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska. To my surprise, I have a knock at the back door, standing Fred Crispin, telling me that I'd asked him to come in and asked him how did he find me, and he said, let's go for a ride. And I had went for a ride with him, and that's where Fred discussed his connection with the organization and how he found me. And then Fred told me he thought it was best that I leave Lincoln, Nebraska, and if I didn't, that he felt there would be trouble for me. And sure enough, within about a couple of days, the police knocked at my door and told me they actually wanted me out of town. I got scared. I got in a car and I took off to Omaha, Nebraska without Fred's knowledge. And at the time, my then wife, Connie Diane Beckham Bates, was her maiden name, and Sirova, they loaded the car up, and they said when they were leaving that the police even stopped them wanting to know my location. And I got in Omaha, and that's where I got in my involvement again with Fred, which found me at a hotel, which he provided me with some funds and told me to get an apartment, just lay low and relax, and which I did. And that's where I met Bob Lavender, which is a printer that's connected with the organization. To date, this is my involvement as far as the Kennedy thing. Then Fred, a thing that came up, we discussed the assassination and things, and about later there in Omaha, this Garrison thing popped up. And I was involved with a Colonel Lowry. We had a thing called B&L Bookstore, which I was going to start a gift shop, and Fred said no. I wanted with Lowry, Colonel Lowry, which was at Offutt Air Force Base on the advice of Crispin. And this was to be a place of business. We never sold no books. About a few days before the Garrison investigation came down, Crispin told me to sever my connections with Lowry. I didn't know why, but he said, just do what I tell you. He was a very impressive man. Matter of fact, he was able to call a plane called Looking Glass by just a telephone call. He could contact this aircraft as airborne. He was able to get me on and off the base at Offutt Air Force Base through securities and stuff. I obtained identification as a second lieutenant, which which showed that I served in the service. I'd met other friends of his, which was Wayne Aho was a major, also had military identification. What the object of the bookstore was, if we never sold a book, I honestly don't know. Chrisman, when the thing came up, the Martin thing, I was sitting at my desk at my home, and Jack Martin, I got hold of and asked him. I found out Martin was I knew that Martin was in the organization, and I thought Martin was to sell me out, using me as the scapegoat. And I got mad at Martin and hung up with Martin, and that's when I received my telephone call from Chrisman, which at the time was not in Omaha. I think he was at Tacoma at the time, telling me that don't worry about the investigation, that I was to go to someplace over in Iowa, that they couldn't serve me there, and not to worry about. I said, well, Jack is selling me out. He said, don't worry about Jack. Jack is himself leading the investigation in another direction. He's going in the opposite direction. Don't worry about him, that he's working closely with the district attorney's office. And also they advised me that aide to the district attorney or assistant district attorney had political ambitions, and Jack and others in the organization knew how to manipulate, knew what to do. At which time...
Excuse me, let me stop you here. You said that Jack and others in the organization knew how to manipulate.
Jack was one of the key men that was leading the investigation and was feeding the information back to Fred Lee Chrisman how it's going.
But you said Jack and other members of the organization.
Right.
So you were told prior that there was other people in Garrison's investigation with Jack that were going to lead the investigation in a different direction.
Yeah, I said, now what about poor Shaw? I said, he's going to really be hung. And he said, don't worry about Shaw. He's going to come out smelling like a rose, that he's going to make several thousands of dollars off of it. And besides that Garrison would step in it, he's going to come out smelling like a, But then that really made me feel good, because then I knew at the time, it made sense that Jack was the plant inside of it and feeding information, only the information he wanted Garrison to know. And as a result of that, I ended up over in Iowa on his advice. And while in Iowa, I rented the trailer on his advice, which he told me that I would be safe, that they had some kind of and I was happy for that, because within just a matter of seconds, I beat the marshals that were serving me the papers. And I ended in Iowa and was safe, and then within, I'd say, a week or so, I received $300 in the mail, and to sustain me. But like an idiot, I was contacted